Hank's Flying Kipper 2. One morning, on the island of Sodor, Hank was pulling the flying kipper. All the crates of fish were loaded into his vans, and the flying kipper was ready to go, and Hank puffed away. The flying kipper was online, and Hank hurried along the line. He was enjoying himself. "Steady, boy, steady," said the driver. "There's plenty of time." Hank was still on time. He enjoyed himself. The flying kipper was still one of his favourite trains around Sodor. He raced past by Wellsworth Station. His driver and fireman were concerned. "Steady, boy, don't go so fast." But Hank wouldn't listen. Then there was trouble. The bridge was wobbly, and Hank slipped off the bridge. The flying kipper was left on the line, and Hank fell down. Hank was extraordinarily hurt, and he couldn't move. Hank was back on the rails. He tried to move, but he couldn't, so Donald had to push him to the yards. Donald was still careful, but not as careful as Hank. Hank went way too fast. "You should be careful next time, Hank," said Donald. "The bridge can be very dangerous for an engine like you." And then Donald was still taking Hank home. The next day later, Connor took over the flying kipper for Hank while Hank was sent to the works to be mended today. Connor was ready. The flying kipper was ready to go, and off he steamed. Come along," said Connor. All right," said the van. Connor hurried along. This time he wasn't as fast as Hank was that day. He raced along the line. "Slow down, Connor," said his driver. "You don't want to end up like Hank did." This time Connor slowed down, just like his driver asked him to. But there was more trouble. There was even more work to come. The rails have become slippery. The bridge was so dangerous that the rails have made Connor go too fast. "I can't stop myself," he said. Unfortunately, he slipped off the tracks, and into a muddy pond. Poor Connor couldn't move. He was stuck, and the flying kipper was late again. "Help!" cried Connor, but no one heard him. At last Connor was back on the rails, and Boko had to shunt him to the works to be mended. Poor Connor couldn't move, just like Hank didn't. And Connor knew it was the worst day of his life ever. Later that day, the men at the works have mended Hank well, and Hank promised he would go slow this time. The guard blew his whistle, and Hank was on his way to the dock. This was where the flying kipper was supposed to go in the first place, and then he knew it. He remembered the old ways to the docks, and off he steamed immediately. I can do it, said Hank. "Of course you can, old boy," said his driver. "You are an American engine." "That's right," said Hank, and Hank the American engine steamed away. Hank was ready. He steamed along. Just then, however, he went to the slippery bridge again, and as promised, Hank finally remembered to slow down. He slowed down easily, and this time he didn't fall off, just like that time when Connor slipped off Shake Shake Bridge and into a muddy ditch. And with that, Hank did not make the same mistake again. "I've done it!" he said. He was brave and he did it. At last he reached the docks. Torindo Jaff was pleased to see that Hank had done very well. You were brilliant," he said. "Without your help, the flying kipper would have been late for the third time." "I know," said Hank. "I'm glad I could make it." "We make a pretty good team, old boy," said his driver. Hank smiled happily. He knew that he did really well, and the flying kipper was no longer late. Hank knew that he could safely cross the bridge again.